Hello everyone, my name is David Anderson and I'm a poet and a member of a poetry group called poetrytoshare.com. We're a small group of poets. We write all kinds of poetry, from sad poetry to humorous poetry, children's poetry, mystery, fantasy, all kinds. What I'd like to do now is to read you a poem, a poetic tale in fact, that I wrote a while back after attending a funeral. This of course was a very sad occasion, but you know, even on sad occasions there can be a touch of humour, and this is a humorous poetic tale, and it's called Freddie's Final Fling. The chapel were full that wet morning, a sea of faces all silent and grim. In the aisle was a shiny new coffin, and inside was darts champion Fred Fling. Now Freddie had died somewhat sudden-like, which annoyed one or two sitting there. It meant they'd be short for next darts match, and the prize was a full crate of beer. So their misery was quite understandable. They'd a right knotty problem, I'd say. He'd left them without any warning, and they were due to plate final next day. Now, though Freddie's body lay in coffin in his best suit and collar and tie, his spirit sat up in the rafters, looking down at his mates from on high. He was right sympathetic to their problem. The darts team had had a good year. Up to now they'd been favourites for title, not to mention that crate of free beer. As he looked at his mates' gloomy faces, and some might quite soon start to cry, he searched for a way to let them all know that his spirits were unusually high. Well, as soon as the service was over, Freddie's mates made a beeline for pub. They needed to have a team meeting to sort out who'd be Freddie's sub. They went into snug and ordered some beer, and picked out a table near a fire. They each raised a glass in respect to their mate, who was sitting alongside, only higher. As Freddie listened into their arguments, it was clear there were differing views. In the end they came to the conclusion a vote would decide who they'd choose. They each wrote a name on some paper and placed them in landlord's new cap. It had to be done right and proper in deciding who'd be the right chap. Now of course they didn't know about Freddie, still hovering 6 feet off the floor. He was only a newly born spirit, but he knew who they'd each voted for. When he saw who it was who was going to win, he reckoned they'd chosen wrong man. So he decided to lighten proceedings by hatching his own cunning plan. Before they had managed to empty the cap, Freddie weaved his newly found magic. After counting the votes to see who had won, they reckoned it were naught short of tragic. The one they had picked was a fellow named Joe, a nice enough chap, that were true, but he couldn't chuck darts for nut toffee. When he played, safest place were the loo. They all looked at each other bewildered. Which ones had just voted for Joe? But they'd agreed to be democratic. The vote was valid, or at least it seemed so. Now Joe was astounded at decision. He knew he was the worst in the club, but he'd often dreamt of a chance such as this, so next day he was first at the pub. Freddie was there with a grin on his face as the rest of the team arrived right on cue. They started the match and Joe did his best, but got worse with each dart that he threw. The others were playing right out of their skins and found they could win with next go. They needed one arrow to hit double top, but it was Joe who was next one to throw. As he stood there, his arm all a-tremble, a voice said, "You can do it, my son." Then his dart headed straight towards target, hit the spot, and they cheered, 'cause they'd won. Freddie smiled that his mates were now happy, lifting Joe's shoulder high off the ground. So don't be too sad at next funeral, 'cause our Freddie might still be around. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you. Okay, bye.